The radio crackled with a distorted voice, a sailor shouting over roaring wind. "Marrow Point's light is burning, but it's wrong. It's flickering by hand." Daniel Reed leaned closer to the receiver, frowning. The lighthouse had been automated for over 30 years. Machines didn't flicker, they didn't move shadows. By dawn, the call was logged as a system malfunction. Daniel, the youngest technician on staff, was assigned to investigate. His supervisor joked, "Say hi to old Thomas Hale for me. He's probably still up there polishing glass." The others laughed. Daniel didn't. He had read about Hale, the last keeper who refused to leave when the lighthouse was automated, whose body was never found. The ferry to Marrow Point cut through a grey sea, the sky thick with fog. The captain avoided eye contact, steering silently. "You ever been there before?" Daniel asked. The old man shook his head. "No one goes there twice." As the island took shape through the mist, Daniel saw it. The lighthouse, tall and bone-white, its lantern glowing dimly in daylight. A human shape stood inside, pacing slow circles around the beam. Daniel blinked and the figure vanished. He stepped onto the dock. The air smelled of rust and salt. The waves hissed against the rocks below. The silence felt wrong, too heavy, too aware. He climbed the narrow path to the door and found it already open, as if expecting him. Inside, dust coated the furniture, yet the air was warm. A kettle sat on the stove, still wet inside. On the wall hung an old photograph of Thomas Hale, uniformed, unsmiling, his eyes scratched out with something sharp. Daniel's radio crackled again faintly. He lifted it to his ear. A voice whispered through the static, calm, deliberate, almost courteous, "Keeper Hale, reporting for duty." Daniel froze, pulse pounding. He turned toward the stairs, spiraling up to the lantern room. The boards above him creaked, a single step, then another, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing. He whispered into the emptiness, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the soft, rhythmic thud of boots above him. Then, the light, though it was midday, flickered on by itself. The heavy iron door groaned as Daniel pushed it open, the echo crawling up the spiral stairs like a breath. Dust hung in the air, shimmering in the faint light seeping through narrow windows. He hesitated on the threshold. The place smelled of oil, salt, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. He moved inside. Everything was exactly as the records described. The old cot, the keeper's coat hanging neatly on a hook, the brass clock ticking faintly though it had no batteries. A plate sat on the table with crumbs hardened like stone. A cup beside it, half filled with brown water. It looked like someone had just left moments ago. Daniel touched the bedspread. It was warm. His hand recoiled. He laughed nervously, trying to convince himself it was the sunlight, but there was no sun here, only fog pressing against every window. He climbed a few steps toward the lantern room, calling out, "Hello, Coast Maintenance. I'm here to check the system." His voice bounced around the hollow tower. No reply, but from somewhere high above came a faint, rhythmic sound. Footsteps, slow, heavy, and real. The radio on his belt hissed suddenly. "Reporting for duty." He froze. The voice was the same one from earlier. He lifted the device to his mouth. "Who is this?" Silence, then faint breathing. Heart hammering, he reached the next floor. A photograph hung crookedly on the wall. Thomas Hale again, this time smiling faintly, but his face was water-damaged, the eyes blurred into pale streaks. Daniel turned away. He swore he could feel someone watching from the stairwell above. The wind outside began to howl. Metal groaned, and the light flickered on again, sweeping across the sea like a dying heartbeat. Daniel climbed faster, every step creaking under his weight. When he reached the lantern room door, he hesitated. The footsteps had stopped. He pushed the door open, and the room was empty, just the turning lens and the endless fog. Then from the darkness below, a whisper drifted up the stairs, calm, old, and close. Keeper Hale reports for duty. Daniel woke to the deep groan of the foghorn, low and mournful, vibrating through the floorboards. His eyes snapped open. The power system was still shut down. There shouldn't have been any sound at all. He sat up on the cot, cold sweat on his back, and listened. The horn echoed again, followed by the faint shuffle of boots on the stairs. He grabbed his flashlight and followed the sound into the narrow corridor. The air had turned colder overnight. His breath misted in front of him. On the table lay the same old logbook he'd seen the night before. But now it was open. A pen rested beside it, ink still glistening. Curiosity pushed through his fear. He flipped the pages. The last entry was dated 1993. Thomas Hale, light secure, weather worsening. But below it, fresh handwriting appeared. October 13th, 2025. Technician Daniel Reed has arrived. His pulse quickened. He read further. He is checking the logbook now. Daniel dropped the pen and stumbled back. The page continued writing, slow, deliberate strokes forming words as he watched. He is afraid, but the light needs tending. He slammed the book shut, breath shaking. "Who's doing this?" he whispered. The lighthouse creaked, answering only with silence. Then from the far wall came the faint hum of the generator. It shouldn't have been running. He moved toward the sound and caught sight of a reflection in the window. A tall figure standing behind him, cap tilted, face pale and sunken. Daniel spun around. Nothing. The air felt charged, alive, like something had just exhaled in his ear. He lifted the radio again, but only static answered. A sudden gust blew the logbook open again, pages fluttering wildly. On the newest line, words burned into the paper like heat. New keeper assigned, Daniel Reed. He stared at the ink bleeding through the page, the smell of smoke thickening in the room. The foghorn bellowed one last time, shaking the glass. Then came the voice, close to his ear, calm and resolute. "Your turn to keep the light." The storm rolled in without warning, wind screaming against the glass, waves pounding the rocks below. Daniel jolted awake to darkness. The backup power had failed. The automatic beacon was dead. Only the storm's flashes lit the room in white bursts, revealing the empty bed, the open logbook, and the faint outline of the staircase leading up. He grabbed his flashlight, but it flickered weakly. The radio spat static, voices lost under the thunder. He could almost make out words. "Light it. Keep the light." Before the signal cut out entirely, a sharp crack of lightning shook the walls. Then he heard it, boots scraping above, steady and deliberate. He climbed, each step echoing louder than the last. Halfway up, a door slammed below, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone striking a match. A faint glow bled through the iron grating overhead. Daniel froze. The top of the lighthouse, the lantern room, was flickering with an orange light, not the cold blue of the beacon. When he reached the hatch, heat poured down in waves. He pushed it open. The lantern room was alive, but not with electricity. The great glass lens turned slowly, lit by a flame burning inside an oil lamp that shouldn't exist. The air shimmered. Then he saw him. A man stood behind the light, charred, uniform blackened, skin cracked like coal but moving, breathing. His eyes glowed faintly, reflections of the flame. Thomas Hale. Daniel's breath caught. The keeper lifted the lamp higher, turning toward him. The smell of smoke and seawater filled the room. Daniel stumbled back, stammering, "You're not real." The ghost's head tilted slightly, expression unreadable. "You can't leave the light unattended." The voice was calm, ancient and absolute. A blast of wind shattered one of the panes. Rain and salt sprayed in, dousing the flame, but only for a moment. It reignited by itself, burning brighter, casting both their shadows across the spinning glass. Daniel backed toward the stairs, trembling, the words echoing again as the storm roared outside. "You can't leave the light. You can't ever leave the light." Waves slammed against the hull of Aegir's wake, each one louder than thunder. Callum Dre gripped the console, eyes fixed on the flickering sonar screen. The storm had hit without warning, walls of black water swallowing the horizon, but through the static hum of the equipment, something else pulsed. A steady, rhythmic ping, too regular to be random, too deep to be human. Nia leaned over his shoulder, her headset crackling. It's repeating every 60 seconds. Coordinates are... Wait, she frowned. Callum, that's below the trench. Dr. Lennox snorted, trying to sound braver than he felt. Probably a ghost signal bouncing off the seabed. Old equipment down there. But even as he spoke, the lights flickered and died. The ship fell into darkness, swallowed by rain and thunder. Only the radio glowed, a dull orange eye blinking in the void. Then, through the static, a whisper, not random noise this time, a voice. The tide is rising again. Nia froze. Did you hear that? Her voice trembled, barely audible above the storm. Callum didn't answer. He could feel the vibration of the words through the metal floor beneath his boots, as if the ship itself had heard them too. Lennox tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Interference. Just interference. Another ping, louder. The radio hissed, and for a split second the sound warped, turning into something that almost resembled a heartbeat. Callum turned toward the window. The storm was dying suddenly, unnaturally fast. The clouds split apart, revealing the black, endless sea. The surface had gone strangely still, reflecting nothing. Then Nia gasped, pressing her face to the glass. Callum, look. Beneath the ship, deep under the water, something faintly glowed. A soft, pulsing light, rising and fading in rhythm with the beacon. Not lightning, not reflection, a light alive. The radio clicked again. The same voice whispered, clearer now, right into their ears, close enough to feel its breath. Follow the light. The storm stopped completely, and for the first time that night, the sea was whispering back. The water pressed around them like a living thing, thick and heavy, swallowing every sound except the hiss of their own breath. Callum's helmet light sliced through the black, catching clouds of drifting silt. The descent felt endless, like falling through midnight. Above them, the ship's lights had vanished, swallowed whole by the sea. Depth 180, Nia's voice crackled through the comms. Still descending. Lennox's tone tried for calm, but carried a tremor. No sonar returns. It's just void down here. Then came the first ping again, faint but distinct, the same rhythm from the storm. Callum turned, checking his wrist display. The signal wasn't coming from below them now. It was ahead. He angled his light downward. Something caught the beam, straight edges, a metallic gleam, then pale stone. A wall. Impossible at this depth. The silt cleared, and there it stood, a tall, cylindrical structure rising from the seabed, encrusted with coral and barnacles that grew upward instead of down. Nia whispered, "No way, it's a lighthouse." The beacon towered in silence, its lamp faintly glowing inside the glass chamber. Callum swam closer, running a gloved hand along the smooth metal of the door. The hinges looked untouched by time, not rusted, but new. "Pressure's stable," Lennox muttered, voice shaking. "This can't be real. Nothing should be this preserved." "Maybe it's not," Callum said softly. As they circled the base, their lights caught something moving inside the glass room above. A shadow, human-shaped, pacing slowly before the glowing lamp. Nia's breathing quickened. "Callum, tell me you see that." "I see it." The figure stopped, turning toward them. Even through the distortion of the water, Callum swore it looked right back. The lamp brightened, once, twice, before fading again to its steady glow. The comms hissed with static. Then a low voice seeped through, muffled, like spoken through water. "Visitors. Already?" Nia's scream cracked through the channel. Callum looked up. The figure was gone, But in its place, the light inside the beacon flared to life, shining directly down at them, beckoning, pulsing, as if calling them in. The door gave way with a hollow groan, the sound swallowed by the ocean around them. Callum led the way inside, his flashlight beam sweeping across the entry hall. The impossible struck first, the air, dry. The droplets on his suit hissed into vapor, as if the sea itself refused to cross the threshold. Nia stepped in behind him, her voice hushed with awe. "It's warm." The interior was frozen in another time. A kettle sat rusting on a stove, the walls lined with nautical maps and old oil lamps that still flickered faintly, as though recently lit. Lennox removed his helmet hesitantly. "Oxygen levels are normal. This can't be right." Callum ran a finger along the wall. Dust, real dust, then stopped. On the mantel, 3 photographs rested in tarnished frames. The first showed 2 smiling lighthouse keepers. The second, the same men beside a third whose face was violently scratched out. "Maybe this place flooded," Lennox muttered, trying to rationalize. "A geological pocket-trapped air sealed it." A slow, deliberate creak interrupted him. Footsteps from above. Callum's flashlight darted to the staircase spiraling upward. The steps were soaked, glistening under the beam. The sound came again. Wet boots dragging against wood. Nia whispered, "Someone's up there." They climbed cautiously, water dripping from somewhere unseen. The higher they went, the louder the distant hum grew, the same deep tone that had pulsed through the radio. Halfway up, Nia's radio crackled. Static, then a soft voice. "Don't look at the light." She froze. "Callum, someone's on our frequency." He lifted a hand to quiet her, heart hammering in his chest. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the railing. The air itself seemed to breathe with the rhythm. At the top, the hallway stretched toward the beacon chamber. The door stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, the glow pulsed in slow, steady waves of gold. Callum stepped closer, then stopped. Across the floor were wet footprints, bare, human, leading into the light. The lamp flickered once, and in that brief darkness, something moved inside the chamber, too tall, too still to be human. Then the light flared again, washing the hallway in blinding white. The smell hit first, salt and something faintly metallic, like blood carried on sea air. Callum stepped into the mess hall, his light sweeping across a table set for 3. Plates of food waited untouched, bread, stew, even steam rising faintly from one bowl. The chairs were pulled out as if their owners had stood only moments ago. Nia whispered, "They were eating." Her voice trembled. "Callum, the food's warm." Lennox forced a nervous laugh. "Preserved by gases, thermal currents, some scientific—" A cup rattled, rolling slowly toward the edge of the table. It stopped, teetering, then fell. The crash echoed through the hall like a gunshot. "Not currents," Callum muttered. "They're here." The walls groaned softly, wood stretching under invisible weight. Nia lifted her camera, taking a quick photo. The flash lit up the room for an instant. When the image appeared on her screen, her hand shook violently. There were 3 figures behind them, faint silhouettes standing by the doorway, heads tilted toward the table. "Callum," she breathed, "someone's watching." The lights dimmed, a low hum building again from somewhere deep below. Callum moved closer to the table, noticing droplets of seawater scattered across the plates, fresh, still sliding down the porcelain. He followed the trail with his flashlight, wet footprints, bare and narrow, leading away through the kitchen corridor. Lennox exhaled sharply. "We shouldn't," but Callum was already moving. The corridor was narrower here, walls slick and glistening like they were sweating. At the end lay a single diver's glove, dripping seawater. He bent to pick it up, still warm inside. Behind them, the plates began to tremble again, clinking softly in rhythm. Nia turned, eyes wide. It's trying to tell us something." The ceiling light blinked once, then again, A pattern, Morse code. Naya's lips moved as she translated, her voice barely more than a whisper. Leave before the tide rises. The final blink plunged the room into darkness. Somewhere above, the beacon groaned to life, its deep pulse thundering through the floor, as if the sea itself had begun to breathe. The wind howled across the black water as Thomas steadied his trembling hands on the boat rail. Waves crashed like beasts in the dark, and through the storm he waited for the familiar rhythm. 2 white flashes cutting across the sea. 1, 2, then darkness. But tonight the horizon flickered again. A third beam, brief, cold, and wrong, shimmered from somewhere behind the cliffs. Thomas blinked hard. "You saw that?" he shouted over the wind. His partner, soaked and pale, nodded silently. The storm seemed to hush for a heartbeat, as if the sea itself was listening. Another flash came, not from the tower, but from the tree line beyond it. By dawn, word had spread through the small harbour town. Old Eli Morgan stood on the steps of the Stormwatch lighthouse, his grey coat flapping in the cold. "It's impossible," he muttered to the fishermen crowding him. "The system only fires 2 beams." But when Thomas showed him the video, the clear pattern of 3 lights, Eli's face drained of colour. He dismissed them with shaking hands. "Bad weather tricks the eye," he said, though his voice cracked halfway through. That night, the wind died. Eli climbed the narrow stairs of the lighthouse, each step groaning under his boots. The lantern room buzzed faintly with power, its gears ticking in steady rhythm. He watched the great light sweep across the water. 1, 2, nothing more. Then, from the window facing inland, a pale flicker blinked once through the fog. He froze. The trees were still, but a light moved between them. Slow, deliberate, almost like it was searching. Eli's breath caught in his throat. "Mara," he whispered, thinking of his wife asleep below. The light pulsed again. Suddenly the room darkened. The hum of the generator fell silent for just a second, and when the power surged back, the control lever for the beam was no longer a 2. It was locked firmly on 3. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the lighthouse wrapped in heavy fog. Mara stood at the doorway, her robe trailing on the damp floorboards. A line of muddy footprints led from the forest to the kitchen steps, too large to be hers, too fresh for the storm to have washed away. She called for Eli, but only the hum of the generator answered. When Eli finally came down, he dismissed the prints as searchers' tracks from the night before, though he hadn't called for any. "It's nothing," he said, forcing a tired smile. But his eyes betrayed him, sleepless, searching the fog beyond the window. That afternoon, a small boat arrived carrying Dean, the Coast Guard technician. He was young, confident, with that polite disbelief only outsiders carried. He inspected the lights, clicked through his readings and said, "Your system's clean, must have been reflection or atmospheric distortion." Mara frowned. "Distortion doesn't whisper." Dean looked up. "Excuse me?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "Someone's been calling my name from the cliffs at night. A woman's voice. I thought maybe..." Her gaze drifted toward the woods. Dean exchanged a look with Eli, smirking lightly. Fog plays tricks on sound. But when evening came, the fog thickened unnaturally fast, swallowing the sea and forest alike. Dean joined Eli in the tower to record a test pattern. 2 flashes cut through the mist, steady, bright. They waited. Then, faint but visible through the trees behind them, a narrow white column of light blinked back. "Jesus," Dean muttered, raising his camera. The lens caught the impossible, a glowing figure standing in the tree line, holding what looked like a lantern. Down below, Mara stepped out onto the balcony, eyes fixed on the forest. The wind was still, yet her hair swayed as if brushed by unseen hands. When Eli and Dean replayed the footage, the light appeared again. but the figure moved closer with every frame, its outline sharper, its face still lost in glare. Then, in the final second of the clip, before static took over, the lantern turned, and the beam shone directly into the camera. The morning air was too quiet. No gulls, no waves against the rocks, only the slow creak of the lighthouse door swaying in the breeze. Eli called out for Mara, his voice echoing through the narrow hallways. Her coat was gone, her boots missing from the rack. He ran outside, heart pounding, and saw them, her footprints in the damp soil, leading straight into the forest. By noon, Dean and 2 locals joined the search. The fog lingered low, curling around the trees like smoke. She couldn't have gone far, Dean said, scanning the ground with a flashlight, though daylight still filtered weakly through the branches. They found no sign of struggle, no sound, only the faint shimmer of light dancing on the wet bark, as if something deeper inside the woods was glowing. That night the lighthouse groaned under the weight of silence. Eli sat by the window staring toward the forest. Then he heard it, a voice, soft and distant, calling his name. He stumbled to the door. "Mara?" The voice came again, closer this time. "Light the way." He followed it through the mist until the trees opened into a clearing. There she was, standing barefoot among the pines, her dress soaked, her eyes wide and unblinking. They caught the faint reflection of a pale beam that seemed to come from nowhere. "Mara," he whispered, rushing to her side. She didn't speak. When he touched her shoulder, she collapsed like a marionette with its strings cut. Dean helped carry her back. She was breathing, her pulse steady, but her gaze remained empty, fixed on something far beyond the walls. Eli sat beside her all night, his trembling hand over hers. Near dawn, her lips moved. A whisper slipped out, raspy and wrong. "She's coming back, for the 3rd. Eli froze. "Who?" Mara's eyes rolled toward him, and for the briefest instant they reflected light again. Not lamplight, not moonlight. Something colder, flickering from the woods outside, pulsing in threes. The storm had not returned, yet the air felt charged, heavy with something unseen. Dean replayed the security footage over and over, his jaw tightening each time. The 3rd beam flashed clearly, but not from the tower. It came from behind the keeper's quarters. Eli stood over his shoulder, pale and trembling. "There's nothing back there," he said. "Just stone and soil." They went outside together. The fog hung thick and grey, muffling the sound of their footsteps. Behind the lighthouse, the ground was blackened in places, small, circular burn marks shaped like a flame. Dean crouched, brushing his fingers over the ash. "It's as if something stood here," he murmured. Inside, Mara lay motionless, her eyes open but unfocused. Then, without warning, she began to whisper, a string of numbers and strange nautical words, her voice flat and distant. Eli recognized them instantly. Coordinates, the same location as the wreck of the Cassia, the ship that sank when the lighthouse lights failed a century ago. Dean's voice shook. "You think this, whatever it is replaying the wreck?" Eli didn't answer. He climbed the tower steps, heart racing, and cut the generator switch. The great lamp died. Darkness swallowed the sea. But through the window, deep in the forest, a thin white beam flickered to life, bright, steady, deliberate. Mara's whisper drifted up from below, somehow louder now. "2 for the sea." Eli gripped the railing. "Mara, stop." Her voice echoed again. "1 for the lost." Dean turned on his camera, the screen shaking in his hands. The 3rd light grew stronger, pushing through the fog, illuminating the window from outside. A faint silhouette moved within it, a woman's outline, soaked, her hair floating as if underwater. Eli stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. The figure lifted her arms slowly, lantern glowing like a small sun. Mara's whisper fell silent, and then, from the dark corridor behind them, another voice, soft, wet, and close. breathed into Eli's ear. You answered the wrong call.